And all these parties have become puppets in the hands of corporates like Ambani or Tata, etc. And that is why, as I was saying, one of the most insidious impacts of corruption has been that public policies, laws like this retrospective tax concession bill, or policies like the mining policy, the nuclear policy, etc., are all being decided not by looking at whether they will serve public interest or not, but whether they will serve the commercial interests of these corporations. And that is why what we have, in fact, when we did an internet search to look at whether there are any credible charges of corruption against cabinet ministers of the present cabinet, we found that at least 15 cabinet ministers were facing very serious charges of corruption, and we were able to get documentary evidence of those charges either from the internet or from some friends, etc. And there was yet no investigation into the charges against these ministers. And that is because the investigating agency, which is the CBI, is controlled by the very same ministers that it was supposed to investigate. So, corruption has placed democracy under threat. It has eroded democracy, and that is why we found that when we embarked on this anti-corruption campaign and we produced or we created this Jan Lokpal bill, whose main object was to set up an independent anti-corruption investigating agency, independent functionally, financially, as well as in terms of appointment, independent of the government, so that they could credibly investigate even cabinet ministers, prime minister, etc. for corruption. We thought at that time that the government would have to respond to public pressure, that if the government saw that there were a very large number of people who were in support of the Jan Lokpal bill, they would have to pass the bill, the government and parliament. But what we found was something quite different. Despite the fact that literally millions of people came out on the streets in support of the bill, every poll, referendum, survey was showing that at least 80% people supported the bill, yet what the government brought in its place in the name of the Jan Lokpal bill was something completely different, which in our view was a bill which was designed to afford further protection to corrupt public servants. So that is why I had called it the promotion of corruption bill rather than the Jan Lokpal bill. At that stage, we realized that no amount of public pressure is going to force this kind of government or this kind of establishment to bring about a credible anti-corruption legislation or put in place a credible independent anti-corruption investigative agency, because that would threaten their own existence. They don't mind losing the elections in the next election, but they certainly mind going to jail, because they know that they will lose this election, BJP will come to power, in the next election the BJP will lose, they will come back to power. And they protect each other also because Ambani controls both of them, the Congress and the BJP. Ambani or such corporates control both of them, or all of them rather. So at that stage we realized two things. First, that this anti-corruption or this corruption is not the only problem. In fact, we realized that there is a more serious problem with the nature and the functioning of our democracy. Today, our only democratic right is to vote once in 5 years to elect our representatives. Thereafter, for the next 5 years, these representatives decide everything, whether nuclear power plants would be built or not, whether genetically modified foods would be introduced or not, whether what kind of schools, how many teachers in the schools, everything is decided by these people. Whether the Jan Lokpal bill would be passed or not, what would be the mining policy, everything is decided by these people without seeking the views of the people who elected them. And that this kind of representative democracy has allowed, or rather facilitated, large corporations bribing them or influencing them to push policies, to push laws for their commercial interests rather than public interest. If this power of making laws and policies had been with the people, then it would have been much more difficult for these corporations to push their interests, because they would have to compromise the majority of the general people. But here you only have to compromise a handful of people, these elected representatives. There are also other problems with even the system of elections. Of course, there is another problem with the nature of democracy, with the functioning of the way democracy works in India, is because it is overly centralized. So decisions which affect, say, even a village are often taken by the state government or taken by the central government, which should normally be taken by the people, or at best the elected representatives of that village, but preferably by the people of that village. Similarly, decisions like whether a nuclear power plant would be set up at Kudankulam or not, the local people who would be most affected in case there is an accident in that plant, they have no say in the matter at all. So there is over-centralization of power and no scope for people's participation in the exercise of that power. And then there are problems with our electoral system also. Today, we find that though people understand that this Congress and the BJP are thoroughly corrupt parties, but they still elect either the Congress or the BJP. Why? Because they feel that they have no other option. Why? Because the smaller parties who might appear to be more honest and credible, they do not appear to have any chance of winning. And therefore people feel that what's the point of voting for them, because only the BJP and the Congress have any chance of winning, or some Samajwadi party or Bahujan Samaj party, and therefore we need to vote for only one of these parties. All of them may be dishonest, and therefore we will have to vote for the least dishonest amongst these, and not for an honest party which they feel has no chance of winning.